Right, hi. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here this evening. It's really wonderful to have this event back in person after a pretty long hiatus for COVID, and just really nice this evening to have teachers, students, parents, and OAs all together for a collective purpose to support our students, and just really nice to have a buzz about the place as well. Fortunately, we've managed to avoid any clashes with the Euros, so that's good. Although I wonder whether some of us would have quite liked an excuse to not watch England performances again. So the purpose of the evening is for students to consider their plans beyond Abingdon, and in particular, clearly, their university plans, to discuss, discover, and decide, if you will, indulge our alliteration. So, in particular, students, we would like you to consider 4 questions this evening, okay? The first one is, which course is right for me? And I think absolutely that has to be your starting point. I've talked about this before. We very much believe in this mantra of course first, institution second, because if you get that course that you have a real burning passion for, you will enjoy yourself more, you will be more tenacious with that course, and be happier and ultimately have greater success. And frankly, the statistics will bear this out, that actually you're less likely to drop out as well, frankly. Secondly, what are the various options available to me within that course? Then thirdly, what do I need to think about when I'm doing my research over the next weeks and months when I'm looking into my courses and looking into available universities? And then lastly, guys, we'd like you to consider, please, what can I be doing, what activities can I engage in that might strengthen my application? So in a few minutes, I'll introduce Mr. Simmons, who's going to run us through guidance grades, and then Mrs. Hodnott is going to give us an overview of what the next steps are regarding university applications. Then after this talk, you will have some subject sessions, and depending on the size of that subject, they might be group talks or they might be individual one-to-one chats. And you'll also have made an appointment, I hope, with your tutor and have a chance to talk through where you're at in terms of your progress and your planning and your research. Okay. There's also the opportunity to talk to some OAs. We've got 25 of them who have very generously given up their time to be with us this evening across a multitude of different disciplines and points indeed in their university career and career beyond university. And they'll be available in the pavilion, and they can answer questions, they can talk about what has worked for them, what they know about your particular area of interest, and clearly what advice they would give to you if they were kind of back in your shoes. Really valuable opportunity. And if I can, I'd love to just put a plug out there to say, we would love you guys to come back in a few years' time and help out and give something back in the way that has happened year on year for as long as I can remember. A reminder too that the UCAS team will be situated in the pavilion as well. Please do come and have a chat, and we can help you with various questions you might have. On that note, I would like to publicly recognise the work that Mrs. Hodnott has put into this event, and Dr. Ambrose. I'm not sure if he's in the room, but if we wouldn't mind giving them a round of applause, I think that'd be good. So, I wish you a productive and informative evening. Thank you once again for being here, and I'll hand over to Mr. Simmons.
Thank you very much, Mr. James. The students in the room will be looking at this thinking, Mr. Simmons has gone mad, he's already done this presentation once, and he's put the same thing up again. That is absolutely true. This is for the benefit of your parents, and hopefully you've passed on some of these messages already, and the messages hopefully haven't been a sort of Chinese whispers type message in the way that it's been passed back. So I'm just here to clarify the difference between guidance grades and predicted grades and how those are formulated. You'll have already had your guidance grades published. I'm sure your parents will have had a look at them on the Poor Parent portal, and you'll obviously had them through your tutors as well and through My Abingdon. And the guidance grades we always publish at this time of year along with your lower sixth exam grade. And the purpose of these is these grades are the grades that your teachers think you're most likely to get in your A-level based on all of the evidence they have about you so far. So actually, when we look at the final results that come in at the end of the A-level course and we compare them to various different predictors, the guidance grades that we give in the lower sixth are actually the most accurate predictors of what students actually go on to get. So whilst it may be the case that some students get slightly better grades in the end, some will also get slightly lower grades, and actually it balances out overall. It's not the case that we're giving kind of suppressed lower grades at this stage. If we actually map those from now towards the A-level, that is actually what our A-level profile of grades will look like across the cohort in the end. So kind of how do we formulate these? These are based on all of the current information available, so how you've been doing throughout the year, how you've done in a number of tests, which I'll talk about on the next slide, and also kind of most importantly, how you did in the summer exam, because that's kind of the most realistic, most similar indicator to the actual A-levels that you'll take next year. The guidance grades, they're non-negotiable. They're the teacher's professional judgment. You can think of them a bit like a report grade that you get at the end of a term. And sometimes these are split grades, so sometimes it may be an A or a B, and that basically means that your teacher's not quite sure. Perhaps you sit somewhere around that borderline, and actually they're not sure at this stage whether it will be an A that you end up with or a B that you end up with. So as I sort of have explained, the guidance grades are formed from the end-of-year exam primarily, but actually we're looking at consistency and patterns throughout the year as well. So is it the case that in your November test you got a certain grade and you're on an upward trajectory, in which case we might think, well, that upward trajectory might continue. Perhaps you've got a fairly flat trajectory. And we use lots of data throughout the year, so the November test is a particular kind of thing, which is a formal test. In the Lent term, some of you will have done some less formal tests in some subjects, and some subjects will have done kind of important essays and those sorts of things, which will form part of that judgment and part of the information that's used. But again, a large majority of the weighting will be on what you've done most recently, which is your summer exam. Your teachers have seen lots and lots of people go through the A-level course over the years. They know pretty well, actually, somebody that's working like the way that you're working, getting the results that you're getting at this stage. They know what you're likely to get at the end based on their professional judgment and experience. And hence, that's why these guidance grades end up being pretty realistic in terms of the overall cohort in the end. Predicted grades, on the other hand, these are the grades that we publish with your UCAS application. And we will kind of assess your predicted grades and make a judgment about your predicted grades in the middle of September towards the start of next term. The predicted grade is slightly different. This is a positive but achievable predictor of what we think you could achieve in your A-level based on what we're seeing about your work ethic and how you're doing kind of as the course has progressed a little bit further. The predicted grades, they can't be a split grade, so if it's the case that your guidance grade is an A/B, it's probably likely, because it's a positive and achievable grade, your predicted grade, that your predicted grade then would end up as an A. But obviously, if kind of between when you did your exam and when the predicted grades come out, you fall off a cliff, your teacher may think, well, actually, that's not actually quite turned out how we wanted, so therefore maybe it's not quite as positive as we hoped for in the end. In terms of predicted grades and guidance grades, there are often a lot of questions that people have, and sort of just understanding the difference between those is quite important. So guidance grades are non-negotiable. Please don't write to your teachers and say, my guidance grade is wrong. Your guidance grade is like a report grade. It's something which can't be negotiated. Perhaps you do disagree. You can absolutely disagree and say, I think that in the end I'm going to end up with an A. If that's what you believe, you are completely entitled to believe that, but your teacher's not going to change their professional judgment on you. But what they might want to see is they might want to see you being able to prove to them that over the course of kind of between now and mid-September, you've showed that actually you are putting in a bit more effort, you are on the right track, and actually that slightly higher grade is a positive but achievable predictor of what you might end up kind of getting in the long run. So the reason we use guidance grades and predicted grades is because the guidance grade is a realistic output. We want you to be looking at a range of university options. I'm not going to take Ms. Hodnot's thunder with this and kind of go into that in a lot of detail now. But we want you to be looking at some realistic options because you have to actually get the grades to be able to get in for most of the universities that you're looking at. But we do understand that actually you also want to be applying some universities which are aspirational, and hence the predicted grades are slightly more aspirational. It's likely to be what you're going to get on a good day, but it has to be realistic and it has to be within the realms of what is possible based on what we've seen of you as an individual. We as teachers can't be kind of making up predicted grades which are vastly inflated. It's our professional integrity which is important here as well. The students will already know that there is the opportunity to do a resit for some subjects in September. Some subjects are offering resit exams. If that subject's something like maths, where actually you've got to perform in an exam situation on the day, they're very likely to offer a resit exam. Some other subjects, the heads of department may have passed on to the students that actually we prefer to see some sustained essay technique being worked on or learning of particular facts in order to prove that you're kind of along the right lines to show that level of improvement. We only allow you to take 2 resit exams in September. The reason being, we know from past trends that if you spread yourself too thin, it's likely that you're not going to see a significant increase in all of those areas, so we really want you to focus on the areas that you want to see the most sustained increase in. We often hear the frequently asked question of, I really want to apply to Bath, but Bath requires higher grades. Will you increase my predicted grades so that I can apply? The guidance grades that you've had at the moment, they're non-negotiable. The predicted grades, which you'll get in the middle of September, we'll be allocating those based on what we've seen of you. There is, in our predicted grades policy, kind of an appeals procedure, which can happen alongside that. But when we are considering the appeal, we are considering it based on the evidence that we can see, based on the work that you produce, based on how you've done in those tests. So it really is in your court as the students to prove to us that you are along those right lines. And yes, that thing that we are looking to kind of help you with in terms of your application is something that you actually can go on and achieve in the long run. I'm now going to pass on to Mrs. Hodnot, who's going to talk about the next steps. Thank you.
Right, hopefully Mr. Simmons didn't actually steal my thunder. Right, so what we're going to talk about in the next about 10 minutes is how you can use your guidance grades, why it's important at the moment because of the university admissions landscape, why and how to make strategic choices, and what you should be doing now. And then I've got a few FAQs of my own. So students hopefully know this, and we did talk about this after Abingdon in January, but the number of UCAS applications is increasing. It is a really tough landscape applying to university at the moment. And the not great news for you all is that's likely to continue, currently projected to 2030. So it's not about waiting another year. It means it's going to be really competitive for you. So it's important that we talk about the right way to approach it. This graph's looking at the difference between predicted grades and achieved grades for accepted students. Now, as you can see, that blue line towards the later years is higher. So that means more students are accepted when there's no difference between their predicted grades and their achieved grades. So what that means is some of you who maybe have older siblings or have an older child or friends with older children who went through this process a few years ago, they might have been able to get a place at university even if they missed their grades potentially by 1, 2, and sometimes even 3. That is less the case at the moment, and particularly when you're looking at high tariff universities, which historically Abingdon students, that's where they are applying to. So we're talking Russell Group, we're talking those universities that are requiring AAB and above, and even ABB and above. They expect you to get your grades to be able to secure your place. So, kind of in summary, there's more 18-year-olds in the population. More of those are applying to university. There's a higher proportion of those applying to high tariff universities. and there's not an increase in the number of places being available at universities, and that isn't projected to change. What that means is there's a decrease in the offer rate. So it is actually harder to get offers in the current climate than it was 5-6 years ago. And that means it becomes increasingly important that you make really smart choices. And what this graph is looking at is looking at the tariff of the university and what they traditionally accept. So for example, if you're looking to apply to universities that are looking for 3 A's, you need to get 3 A's to get an offer to get a place. If you're looking at universities that are asking for BBC, actually you can apply to those universities with slightly lower grades, and you may still get what they call an aspirational offer. But again, the vast majority of Abingdon students are applying to high tariff universities. And what that means is you need to exceed those grade entry requirements, and you need to achieve those grades in your final exams. So what do strategic choices look like? So at the moment, you should be using your guidance grades to research possible universities and possible courses. As Mr. James said, absolutely look at course first, university second. Now, at the moment, I would recommend you look at between 5 and 7 different university courses. With your guidance grades in the middle, I would suggest your range covers 1 grade below your guidance grade and 2 grades above your guidance grades. And again, the reason for that is your predicted grades tend to be a positive but achievable view. So for most of you, your predicted grades will be slightly higher than what you've been given as guidance grades. Now, when we come to the autumn, and actually you have 5 choices to make, because obviously in the UK you can apply to 5 universities, then what a good range looks like is 2 aspirational, which is at your predicted grades, but likely to be quite popular competitive universities. 2 solid choices, which is again, is likely to be at your predicted grades, but maybe ever so slightly less popular, less selective. And then 1 safe insurance choice. And what that would be is at least 1 grade below your original predicted grades, or it would match your current guidance grades. What you're looking for by having that range is to achieve 3 or more offers, and that puts you in a really strong position to make decisions next spring when you're looking to narrow down to firm and insurance. Because it becomes quite stressful if you only get 1 or 2 offers, because then you can't really judge when you need to narrow it down to 2 based on what your academic work has been at that time. To be able to do that, it's not just looking at grades, it's also looking at different types of universities, and that's particularly important for highly selective courses. And when I say that, I'm specifically talking about medicine, law, economics, and computer science. And what I mean by different types of universities, I mean not all Russell Group. I mean universities that teach in different ways, which you will find out when you do your research and you start looking at modules and you start looking at how they teach their individual course. As I mentioned in terms of your range, really you're looking at your predicted grades. You're not looking above. Universities who ask for A, B, B, and above will only traditionally give you an offer if you're applying with A, B, B, or above. They're expecting you to exceed their entry requirements. So consider entry requirements a minimum. Even if you exceed their entry requirements, and sometimes quite vastly exceed their entry requirements, you are not guaranteed an offer. There are plenty of students who apply to Oxford, Cambridge, Durham, Leeds, and they might even have 4 A stars, and they don't always get an offer. So there's the other aspects of your application that become important. So just bringing back a few slides from the After Abingdon presentation as a reminder, try to think beyond the Russell Group. I get asked very, very often, Miss, I only want to go to Russell University. As a reminder, not all Russell Group universities are performing equally well. And you might be surprised by a few stats. So I tend to use the Guardian League tables. And based on the 2024 Guardian League tables, you might be surprised that Bath, Loughborough, Lancaster are all in the top 10, where you have Edinburgh, Bristol, Exeter, and Southampton are in the top 20. That you have Aston and Swansea currently outrank Cardiff, And you have Nottingham Trent, Oxford Brookes, Reading, all outrank both Nottingham and Newcastle. Now that's not me saying don't apply to Nottingham and Newcastle, don't apply to Cardiff. It's me saying don't discount universities just because they're not Russell Group, because actually a lot of those universities are doing really good work and investing quite significantly in their student experience, and you can absolutely benefit from that. So again, just as a reminder, how are universities making decisions? Fundamentally, it's your academic record. They're looking at your predicted A-level grades, they're looking at your subject combination at A-level, the relevance and the breadth in relation to the subject area you're applying for. They are looking at your GCSEs and they are looking at your personal statement. There are a few universities who don't put as much weight on your personal statement, but it absolutely becomes important if you happen to be a borderline case. And again, when you're looking at really selective universities, and particularly for humanities courses, your personal statement tends to become very important. And as you go to open days, you may find that a few universities may tell you they don't look at personal statements for your course area. For example, I believe it's business at Leeds, a few courses at Exeter, they will say, we don't put much emphasis on your personal statement. But that's potentially one, maybe two universities out of your 5. So guarantee the other 3 are absolutely looking at it. In terms of personal statements, again, as a reminder, it's really important because it's your only opportunity to tell admissions officers about yourself. Otherwise, they're only really seeing your grades. So it's absolutely important. And again, as a reminder, personal statements for you are the same single 4,000 character level statement. And it's not yet changing. But even if you're thinking, oh, that's okay, I'll wait and apply the following year, it's not worth it, because instead they're going to ask 3 questions which are exactly the same thing we tell you to put in your personal statement. It's things like your motivation, your passion for your course, your preparedness for your course, and what else you might have done to prepare for university study. Again, going back to some of the previous slides, but a really good reminder of what's important. Most important thing about your personal statement is going beyond the A-level. Universities aren't interested in what you had to do for your lessons. They're interested in what you've chosen to do to push your knowledge within your subject area. So, timelines and deadlines, and these come around really, really quickly. What you should be doing now is filling in your UCAS form. All of you should have registered within school in tutor time. You need to be researching and hopefully visiting universities. You need to be working on your personal statement. If you're planning to apply for Oxbridge Medicine at that early deadline, before you leave this term, before you leave school on the 5th of July, you should have at least a rough draft written. Everyone else, I would encourage you to have some really strong bullet points that then you can expand and develop over the summer. And you need to be adding to your evidence. And again, that's something you should be talking about tonight within your subject sessions. If you don't hear that information, you should ask and you should speak to your subject teachers. In the autumn, again, you get predicted grades confirmed in the middle of September, and those are in time to be sure that students thinking about applying to Oxford, Cambridge, and medicine will also have those grades. You will be finalising your personal statement and you'll be submitting your final application. The internal deadline, so you need to submit your application to the UCAS office by the 23rd of September if you're applying to Oxbridge Medicine or Vet Sciences, and you need to do the same, everyone else, by the 20th of November. The reason those deadlines exist are because we check your application in a lot of detail, and 85% of applications that are submitted we return because there's errors, there's grammatical errors in your personal statement, and you haven't necessarily filled out your application form correctly. So do use the guidance that you've been given, but it is in your best interest to meet those deadlines, because if you don't submit them, we won't have time to check them and to feed back corrections. If you are applying to Oxbridge, you will need to sit those entrance exams, and there will be interview practice, those who have interviews. A few notes on Oxbridge. Your really strong candidates, we're looking at guidance grades being at all A stars, A/A stars. If you set your GCSEs at Abingdon, they would be looking for those to have a majority of 9s. It's not to say if you have slightly lower than that you shouldn't apply, but it is saying you may be at a disadvantage unless you meet that criteria. And you would be expected to have insatiable appetite for your subject. An Oxford lecturer described it as they would expect your subject to be really at the centre of your life. Now that sounds both quite intimidating, a little bit sad, but potentially really exciting. In terms of entrance tests, and that's not just Oxbridge, that does include law, medicine, a few courses at Imperial, and occasionally at other universities on courses like maths, computer science, and economics. Those tests are no longer set in school. They are set at Pearson VUE testing centres. Those exist all over the world. Registration opens for some of them on the 1st of August, others on the 15th of August. We expect particularly local centres to be very busy. It's in your best interest to register as soon as you can in August. So that means going online and doing that even if you're on holiday. If you miss those deadlines, school cannot help you. So be sure you're on top of those deadlines. If you are eligible for exam adjustments, you need to ask for that evidence before you leave school, and you need to ask for that evidence tonight, because today is the deadline. If not tonight, absolutely first thing tomorrow morning. Otherwise, you may not have the evidence you need to be granted the exam adjustments you need for the Oxbridge entrance exams. How school supports you. We will give you feedback on personal statements. I won't go into the detail, but as you can see, different people, I suggest, give different types of feedback. Where the UCAS office comes in, we ensure your final version is absolutely as good as it can be. And we're also really good at helping you if you potentially get some conflicting advice, and that absolutely does happen. I would say, and I'm really sorry, parents are rarely the right person to give you feedback on your personal statement. It doesn't mean don't share it, but it means you might want to listen to your subject teachers, you might potentially listen to your tutor, and absolutely listen to myself, Dr. Ambrose, when we give you feedback. We will also be doing one-to-one application reviews. Those will be optional, and you can book those in. I won't force you to come look at your application with me, but it is absolutely in your best interest to do so. Generally speaking, Oxbridge and Medicine will do those in September, start of October. Everyone else will tend to do that in November and the very start of December. We do interview practice as a school. That is open to anyone who has a university admissions interview. So that tends to be Oxford and Cambridge, medicine, but there's also a few courses who also do interviews. Things like architecture and music tend to have them as well. So some frequently asked questions. Should I apply deferred? I would say if you know what it is you want to apply for, and you definitely want a gap year, absolutely apply deferred. There's a few universities that will make it harder to get an offer, but it's still going to increase your end chances of getting a deferred offer by making that original application. Again, if you're sure you want a gap year, and if you know what it is you want to study. Should you apply now or after A-level? It's completely up to you. You do not have to apply this year. There is a lot of benefits to applying post A-level, particularly, obviously, if you want a gap year. There's a lot of benefits to applying when you are in year 13. And mainly that is you get the day-to-day school support, you get your tutor nagging you to be sure that you're doing all the right things and in the right time. So if you know what it is you want to study, I would absolutely encourage you to apply in your upper 6th year. What if you want to apply to international universities? I would say great. Be sure Mr. Triff knows that, and he will absolutely support you every step of the way. You can apply to the UK as a backup. You can apply to international universities as a backup. Anything goes. It's wherever you want to do with your future. What if you want a gap year? I'd say fantastic. Gap years, there's lots of benefits in doing a gap year. Universities like students who have gap years because you tend to come back focused and mature. That doesn't necessarily mean you're more likely to get an offer, particularly at certain universities. For example, Durham, as one example, Oxford, Cambridge, again, Leeds for business, they don't tend to give deferred offers. It's not because they don't want to give a deferred offer, it's because they're really popular and selective, and they don't want to reduce the number of offers they give the following year. So they tend to encourage you to wait and reapply. Should you do an apprenticeship or a degree apprenticeship? If you want to, absolutely. Degree apprenticeships, you can apply for some of those through UCAS. Absolutely incredible opportunities. What I would say is don't view them as a backup. A lot of degree apprenticeships tend to be more competitive than applying to Oxford or Cambridge. They are really selective and they tend to take students who have the absolute top grades. Not all of them are that competitive, but some are. So it's really important that you are aware of the competitiveness of the apprenticeship that you're applying for. And what if I don't want to go to university? That's absolutely fine. You are not on a university conveyor belt. The reason why this session is about universities is because traditionally, about 98% of Abingdon students go on to UK universities. So if that is not you, just let me know and I won't chase you when it comes down to deadlines. A very brief reminder of what we have for the rest of the evening, and then I will close to let you get on with it. But you should go to at least one subject session, whether that's a group talk or a one-to-one. Again, you'll meet your tutor. Do talk to the OAs in the pavilion. I think with the exception of 2, all of the OAs are current university students. They're students who finished here and had this virtual event in the last 3 years. So there's lots of students you may recognise who graduated last year and probably less so, but the 2 years before. So again, they're currently on their university course, so go ask them questions. If they're not studying the course that you're interested in, ask them about just their university experience. They have a lot of insight to give and they're very happy to give it. The sixth form team will be in the pavilion. So if you have any broader questions around, for example, alternatives to university, if you're unsure about what it is you want to study, take any gap year or international unis, do speak to Mr. Triff. If you've got questions around Oxbridge, Dr. Ambrose, Mr. Richardson's there, and Mr. James will be there as well. There's a few changes to note. There was a biology group talk that has now moved to one-to-ones. Students who they were expecting to come to the group talk have been contacted and given an appointment time, either with Mr. Goodman or Mr. Whitworth. If you hadn't booked a one-to-one for the biology talk, but you want to see them, by all means, do speak to them. They are in the pavilion with the other subject one-to-one teachers. For tutor one-to-ones, if you're in Miss Hancock's tutor group, please see Mr. Border. If you're in Dr. Haywood Longsdale tutor group, please see Mr. Stockdale. With that, I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. Please utilise this opportunity. Spend the next hour and a half thinking about what it is you want to do and the steps you need to do to be able to realise your aspirations. Thank you very much.